this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. There have been many times in my life and certainly in my career where I've had to take a second look. Now, you can apply this, I don't know, in your own experience. You know, it's like, yeah, well, I don't know if I want to go down this road or not. I visited one time before. This happens a lot in investigations. You kind of walk away from it and you know, wait, something was not right. I got to go back and view it again just to try to get a sense for what I'm seeing, or maybe confirm that I'm not losing my mind, because there were many times when I thought that I was. You get really caught up in details lots of times. But today, I want to talk about a case that's kind of unusual. It's kind of unusual in the sense that we've got not one, but two autopsies on the same person. It's not something that you necessarily see every day as a death investigator. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Brother Dave Mack, good to be back with you, my friend. I sent this case to you because, well, first off, it's been in the news. I'd actually had a couple of people reach out to me about it, and it's in kind of I'm not going to say isolated, but it's not something that really made the news nationwide. But I got to tell you, there's a lot of stuff that makes the news nationwide that's like, I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's just in the news cycle. And I look at this case and I think, wow, if you're really interested in forensics, if you're interested in kind of a slice of life that doesn't happen every time, I would think that any news person out there worth their salt would kind of want to dig their claws into this case.
You know, I will tell you this, Joe. I counsel people to not get divorced when they've been married for a little while, just because things are not what they thought they were going to be. Yeah. I'm just not a fan of divorce, and you and I have both been through this.
Yes.
And knowing what you do go through in a divorce makes it difficult. And yet, I will tell you this, divorce is better than murder. And yet we continually see people choosing to end the life of somebody they stood before God and everyone to love, honor, cherish until death do us part. And then you decide, well, wait a minute. I had my fingers crossed till death do us part, or when I decide to kill you. It works that way, I guess. You're living it out, because we have a guy here who's Kevin West. He's 52. He's a fireman. Now, when we're little kids and there's certain things we want to be, boys in particular, boy, that sounds, I'm old and sexist, I guess. But back in the day.
Hang on, Dave. This is a safe space. You can
no, it's not. Not with you and me, it's not. Look, when if your gender fluid gets on me, we're going to fight. I'm just telling you. Lord. But here's the scoop. When you're in second grade and you list out, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, when we were kids, maybe astronaut, that was up there. Then firemen, policemen. Those were the types of people we looked up to. Now, granted, I'd love to be a baseball player, football player, what have you. Those are, those things are cool. But when you really looked at those attainable, it was the firemen, the policemen, because they're good people. They actually help others. They are superheroes in regular clothing. That's who we want to be.
Yeah. And listen, I love my police officer friends to death. All right. I've got a multitude of them. And I've said this before, I always, kind of trumpet the exceptional job that people in the fire service do, because, the old adage about they're running into a burning building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I, for one, am going to be fleeing. But yet over and over and over again. And, for those that haven't heard the story, one of the coolest gifts I ever got, I think I was 3 or maybe 4, my uncle, who is a retired judge, in Louisiana, he didn't have kids at that point in time. And so de facto, I was like the only child in the family. So he would really give me these cool gifts at Christmas time. Dave, he bought me Now, tell me this isn't nostalgia. He bought me a Texaco Fire Chief firefighter helmet, and it was in the shape of the old helmet, that went back and down, and it had a radio inside of it. And I wish I still had this thing, and it was one of my most treasured gifts. And listen, even to this day, cop cars are one thing. I can see them go by, and I can tell the difference between the sirens. Fire truck goes by, dude, I'm stopping, I'm watching, because you never know. Because when you see one, that there's going to be multiple other ones, different pieces of equipment, and they all have a very specific job. But I don't think that the murder of your wife is included in that job description, Dave.
No, and I think that's what really frustrates me these days. And look, Kevin West is 52. His wife, Marcy, is 48. He gets up really early. It's like 4:27 in the morning, and he calls his fire department, his buddies. My wife is having a seizure. I think she's dead. Send help. Now, I'm going to be honest, Joe. If I call 911, they're going to tell me how to do CPR and do other things. They're going to ask a lot of information. I don't know if that's the case when you're a battalion chief like Kevin West was. I don't know. Everybody, that works there, I would guess. And I don't know if they treat them the same way. I just have no clue. I'd like to get that 911 call to see how it was handled.
Well, let me tell you this, and I've heard these kind of calls before involving people, not or involving, somebody that winds up being, under the microscope for a potential homicide perpetrator. But I've heard these calls before that are put in over the 911 system, and the person that's putting in the call will say, I'm officer so-and-so of such and such department, and I've got an emergency at my home. And have you ever physically been to a 911 center before?
I have. Yeah.
Okay. I like going to them because it's mind blowing. When you walk in, you see it. And I wish I could remember the name of the podcast. I love this guy. Brandon is his first name. I've met him at CrimeCon. He's a guy that is from Nashville and does.
Oh, yeah. I know you're talking about.
Yeah. And he does the 911 dispatch thing. He's got his own podcast. And oh, my God, he is so cool. What a great guy he is. But when you walk in, it's this darkened space and you see the glow of the screens and all that sort of thing. Listen, if you're a battalion chief, people in the 911 center, they know you. They know who you are. So you drop a name like that, you might say, this is Chief, so-and-so.
Right.
This is what's going on. And sometimes I think that the motivation behind that could be to expedite services.
That's what I would do.
Yeah, this is the chief. But Dave, let me pitch something to you that's a bit more sinister.
Oh, man.
Knowing what we know now,
right?
Because, by the way, I'll go ahead and kind of give this away at the front end. This is an adjudicated case that we're talking about. I'm kind of wondering if maybe he made this call on some level, and it was so he could get the story right.
Yep.
Because he's the one that gets to control the narrative. Yep. If you drop the dime on this and you know how the system works, and look, you're the chief, man. If you're the chief, there's a high probability that not only are you good at managing, the fire station, the equipment, the personnel, all that stuff, dude, there's also a high probability that you're also a certified EMT or maybe even a paramedic. And so you've got somebody that's knowledgeable on the other end of the phone. And look, he says seizure. Mm-hmm. Hey, look, he's probably seen hundreds of seizures.
Yeah.
I'm buying it, man. Right. I'm buying it.
Well, and it's his wife. It's not a stranger. It's actually his spouse. And he's calling 911. And I actually did pull it up. He said she was having a seizure, had stopped breathing, and that he had begun performing CPR. And when first responders arrived at the scene, they continued with life-saving measures, but she was pronounced dead. So I'm guessing he knew exactly what was going on with her now that we have a little more information. But still, I think you're right, Joe. I think the reason things were treated the way they were at first was because of his position in the department as a battalion chief, with somebody who did know what they were doing, why would you suspect, But it went pretty quick through the process. They got her, she's passed, got a quick look at the autopsy. Inconclusive, I think, is what they came up with. Now, what does it mean when it's inconclusive? I mean, you've got a dead body, Joe.
No. I'm so glad you asked this question. You know who I began thinking about when I heard this case? And you're going to recognize, the first name is Tammy. The last name is Daybell.
Yeah.
And so I think about, and those cases, plural, are also tragic, but there was something about Tammy that really kind of drew me in. And do you remember, there was a call that went out relative to her death where she's found there on the floor adjacent to the bed. One child was there, said that she had this cone coming out of her mouth. And of course, they wound up not doing an autopsy, Oh my gosh, don't even get me started. Anyway, Tammy was, I think, approximating the same age as this lady.
Mm-hmm, she was.
Okay. And kudos to them. They went ahead and did a postmortem examination. And they're calling it an autopsy. I'm very curious to the extent that they did this autopsy, because look, Dave, she's young. She's 48 years old.
Right.
There is no reason under heaven, unless she's got some kind of unknown condition, that you would not do an autopsy. It demands it, because listen, if she doesn't have a medical history, and what did I say earlier about the husband? He has planted the seed now. He's controlling the narrative. The real key here is that he has used the term seizure. All right.
Right.
So this is kind of why he's kind of play on the field here. All right. Oh, well, she had a seizure. We know what a seizure looks like.
Wow.
But they go ahead and do the autopsy. And here's something really interesting. With seizure-related cases, guess what our primary focus is at autopsy? It's the brain. It's the brain, hands down. I need to know how much time has elapsed here when they made this diagnosis. I'm wondering, because seizure is floating around. Excuse me, I keep mispronouncing that. But seizure is floating around. Guess what we do with the brain in cases like this? We will take a brain and we won't dissect it at autopsy. What happens is that the brain, if you imagine that the normal anatomical positioning of the brain, it's kind of like you're looking at the two hemispheres of the brain. We actually invert the brain, and there's there's an area that's referred to as a circle of Willis that's underneath the brain, that's forward of like the cerebellum, and there's a complex of vessels that run through there. We take string and we run it through these vessels, all right, and not like putting it in the vessels, but underneath the vessels. We put it into a bucket of preservative, and it's inverted. So the brain is like upside down, and you tape both ends of the string to either side of the bucket, and then you close the lid. Now, it's floating in preservative. The reason we do this is so that the brain will fix.
What do you mean fix?
Well, it'll fix. The formalin, which is used, and they're using kind of a different type of composition now than in the old days when I was first started out. But the formalin causes the brain to essentially firm up, because the brain is very...
Because when you say fix, you mean that it becomes a solid.
It does. It's more solid than it was,
By the way, until we started doing this, I did not know that it was pretty much a gushy. I thought it was hard. I thought it was like meat.
I think the real term you want to use is probably, I hate to say spongy, because the lungs are kind of spongy. But the brain itself is not like, it's not intact like the myocardium of the heart. I say intact, that's inaccurate, but you know what I'm saying.
Together.
And so
loose.
You have to get it so that you can actually examine it. The big question is, did they do that with the brain initially or not? Because the first autopsy, was inconclusive. Dave, one of the reasons I like to not surprise you with these things necessarily is because I know you've spent your life in media, in reporting, in radio, and I love to teach. So it's like, I've mentioned before, Dave and I are literally staring at each other like we're at a table. We're on computers though, and we're seeing, so I can see every expression and on my friend's face, when he reacts to these things. And it's not like he was shocked or anything, but you can see there's like a light bulb going on. And I love that because I feel like I'm actually teaching. And so talking about the brain, one of the things that we have to do is you want to let it fix. Okay. So it has to fix over a couple of days. All right. So it's not like it would necessarily be overnight. I'm thinking probably 2 to 3 days, relative to when it gets to the point. And here's one other thing, Dave, with a young woman like this, forensic pathologists are fantastic. Okay. They're great. But with someone that suddenly dies, you've got the word seizure floating around, and it's inconclusive. I want to put that brain into the hands of what's referred to as a neuropathologist. We talked a lot about Ellen Greenberg, and there's a very famous neuropathologist that was kind of peripherally associated with her case. That's the kind of person you want to get the brain into the hands of, because they understand the pathology of the brain, because that's in the spinal cord. That's what they focus on, these sorts of things, because they can take it up another level from what a regular forensic pathologist or hospital pathologist can do. But, Dave, it was inconclusive, but, we've kind of got some insights, changing gears a little bit here. We've got some insights into kind of the familial dynamic here, or the couple's dynamic with these two.
There's so much here. And I will say this, Joe, that the fireman community is small. So is the police community.
Yeah.
That blue line, the red line, whatever you want to call it, those lines they're drawn for a reason. They do circle around one another, but they also all talk. And in the community, there was a lot of talk about the relationship of Kevin West and his wife, Marcy. There was a lot of talk. They'd been married for a long time. And Kevin had not always been faithful, I guess is the best way to put it. Matter of fact, there was a girl, a girl when they first met 20 years ago or so, that he had a relationship with. Her name is Cynthia Ward. Back in 2004, when Kevin is married to Marcy, he and Cynthia began a relationship, 2004. Now that relationship moves away, and Cynthia goes and does her thing for a number of years. A couple of decades pass, and in 2023, all of a sudden, they reconnect, Cynthia Ward and Kevin West. Now, when they reconnect in 2023, Joe, they're both involved. Kevin's still married to Marcy. Cynthia's involved with somebody else, but they begin meeting secretly, and the relationship blossoms. It has been said by those who knew them that Kevin was obsessed with Cynthia. And this was an open secret among certain groups. Now, I don't know if Marcy knew. I don't know if she knew her husband was cheating. In my own heart of hearts, I hope she didn't. I really do. Because what a way to live.
Yeah.
But this is why I always tell people, don't get married to have an affair. Don't get married and cheat. Deal with the situation in the relationship. I promise you can get back to where you were if that's what you want. It's just, I'll be honest with you. Do you really want to be with a cheater?
Yeah.
Because that's who you're with. If you're cheating on your spouse, whoever you're cheating with is willingly cheating with you. They'll do it to you.
Yeah.
You'll both do it to one another. You have no scruples. Now, in this particular case, Kevin was so obsessed with Marcy. He had really taken this a bit far, and it left doors open for the investigation. So after that initial autopsy, which, again, I really question what they did for an autopsy, Joe, but people in the community calling saying, hey, this is not what you think it is. There were problems. And so immediately. Well, I guess within days, because, things did happen. And a second autopsy was ordered. How difficult, Joe, is it to get a second autopsy when somebody has they're already dead, and you've already got the grieving spouse? And just because the people in the community are having a rumor monger time, do we really want to put this poor man who just lost his wife through misery again?
Yeah, you do. And listen, I don't, it's my old saying, I always say, like Grandpappy would say, let the hide come with the hair.
Yeah.
When you're looking at a situation like this, because listen, one of the most difficult things you can do is exhume a body. If you have suspicions, before that body goes in the ground, you better work that out real quick. Because one of the things that judges absolutely hate to do is cracking open graves. They don't like to do it. And you're going to have to really go some distance in order to convince them. It's, to get, we talked about this before, orders of exhumation and this sort of thing. But I, like you, I have a lot of questions relative to the initial exam. I'll call it an examination.
Right.
Because, she was following that examination. She's released to the funeral home.
And it seemed like it was quick.
Yeah, it kind of did. And, going back to what I'm thinking about the specimen of the brain and all these things, because you're putting it out there that this is a seizure. All right. And all answers rest within the brain, okay, when it comes to some kind of neurological event that's going on. And for those of you that have never witnessed a seizure, it's one of the most terrifying things you can absolutely see. Kimmy, was a teacher for years and years and years. And she, even more so than I, in public schools, there were kids that had seizures on a regular basis, and she got kind of used to it. I would never get used to it. It's just one of these things that when you see it, really leaves a mark on you, and you have to learn how to respond to that.
I seen one time, Joe.
Yeah.
And it freaked me out to the point where I actually learned what to do, because I was so useless. Yeah. And I thought, they're going to get hurt.
You see that the body goes rigid.
Yeah.
You'll see them beginning kind of these kind of contortions on the floor.
Yeah.
You can see them kind of banging about on the floor. You're thinking head injury. Mm-hmm. And they manifest in all manner of ways. And you can even have these kind of passive, little tiny seizures. You can have massive seizures. They don't all look the same, but they're still terrifying. I have to have, as a medical legal person, I have to have an answer for that. I'm really wondering how the disposition of the body took place in that time frame, because that's a critical time. I'm happy that somebody looked at the body, unlike Tammy Daybell, where they wound up having to do an exhumation in that case. I present to you Exhibit 1A. Mm-hmm. And, the other problem is, let's just say that they had elected to do cremation here, wow. and that could have potentially been facilitated. It could have been requested, but for whatever reason, this kind of back channel talk that was taking place indicated that there was a lot more to it. I can only imagine, Dave, that that whoever was making these comments relative to what had happened in this relationship prior to her death, they had the ear. Okay. They had the ear of somebody that could make a decision. And listen, you talked about, kind of the closed community. Cops, women get a really hard time, I think, many times about gossip and all these sorts. Guys are the worst.
Oh, yeah.
We are the absolute worst. We're like a knitting circle. We'll sit around and, we can kind of blow it off and say, oh, we don't gossip about anybody. No, that's a bunch of malarkey. We do. Yep. And you get groups of people that are together for a protracted period of time. words are going to fly. You're going to hear it because, they don't have anything better to do than to dig into other people's business, or they could be affected by it relative to their jobs because this guy's distracted from what he should be doing and managing people. And to be quite frank with you, it pisses people off.
Yep. And you mentioned Tammy Daybell. She died in October and they exhumed her body in December. It was almost 8 weeks later. In this case, January 8th, we're just past 2 years ago, okay?
Yep.
January 8th, 2024, 4:27 a.m., that's when the 911 call came in. It took them until March 20th before they did the second autopsy. March 20th. So a little bit longer than Tammy Daybell. She was in the ground, but they did exhume her, and that second autopsy on March 20th is where they decided. And that's why my question, when you've got his attorney we've already said it's adjudicated at trial, they're saying that she was having these headaches and that's what contributed to her seizures that caused her death. Meanwhile, the second autopsy that is done a couple of months later determines that her death was a homicide caused by asphyxia and blunt force trauma to the neck. How are you going to find that out 3 months later that you couldn't find out January the 8th or 9th?
Because her body's been fixed. This answers a big question for me because it's very mysterious. I'm glad that you brought this up. And let me kind of expand on this just a wee bit. When, how I talked about the brain with the formalin, right? Yeah. And how it firms up. And anything that's there is, first off, you've diminished, you've ceased decomposition at this point in time. Okay. Decomposition is not happening with the brain. To a lesser degree with the body, but still you've kind of stemmed the tide. It's still going on in certain areas, but not to the degree, say for instance, if you had an unembalmed body that you placed in the ground. By that time period, what's the number of weeks we're talking about now?
12, 10.
Yeah. Let's just say 10 weeks of an unembalmed body buried in the ground. You're going to have serious decomposition. So it tells me that there's a high probability that she was preserved. Okay. And again, I go back to why did he choose burial as opposed to cremation? Maybe it's prohibited by virtue of something she had requested. Maybe they had their wishes in a will. Maybe it was a religious objection. You never know.
Yeah.
But anything that was going on with her body trauma-wise, all right, Dave, I'm telling you, you start to get into the structures in the neck, which sounds like that's what we're referring to.
Yeah.
You're still going to be able to see those focal areas of hemorrhage that are there. The big question here. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All that time later, after she's embalmed, you could still see that?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Absolutely. Yeah. It'll be glaring, as a matter of fact. And you can still appreciate if this is, antemortem versus postmortem or perimortem. It went on in the throes of death. The big question I'm left with here is, how'd you miss it in the first autopsy? One of the things I've been able to do at Jack State recently, Dave, and I've talked about this, I will continue to talk about it because I'm very proud of it, because I now have an anatomy lab. Interestingly enough, and this dovetails with this case that we're talking about, I have used it as a space to help teach our colleagues in public safety. And I'm not talking about the kids that come to the school. I've opened the door to police officers and, get ready, fire department. So last semester, I had every single member of the fire department in our little town, and I did it for 3 successive days because they all, they work 24-hour shifts, come in, and they got to experience being able to be around a decedent, handle the organs of the neck, and their medical director, who is a physician, actually got to come in and participate with them, and they were able to take literally I'd removed the trachea from the body that I had, and they were able in real time, because they use things like dummies, and I think they use pigs in order to work on intubation, when you're putting in a tube. And this was really cool because I had these guys be able to visualize how a trach actually goes in, and they can see the mechanism of it. And so that was a big thrill for me, and got to get all of our firefighters through there. Dissection of the neck itself is very, well, first off, it's mandatory when it comes to an autopsy. It's not something that you say, well, I'm going to dissect everything else, but I ain't doing the neck. Dave, when we do the dissection, people don't realize this, we take the tongue out too. So we go up superior into the soft palate, okay, in the floor of the mouth is the best way I can kind of describe it. And with the mandible, which is your jaw, your lower jaw, we will trim out all of the connective tissue, the muscle tissue, and literally begin to strip the tongue out on the backside of the cervical spine, taking all of the organs of the neck out so that we can actually take them out with the trachea in place, the top end of the esophagus, and we lay them out on a board, and so that we can fully examine them. And this is very common. This is how we get to things like, people always hear about the hyoid, Dave. And this is one of the ways that in place, or as we say in forensics, in situ, INSITU, which means in place, we can see the hyoid in situ. Okay. So like if relation to the tongue and the top of the trachea, we can actually see if there's any little focal hemorrhages around the hyoid, because if there's focal areas of hemorrhage around the hyoid, that means that there's probably an underlying fracture, or at least it's been traumatized to the point. And you'll get they're not like petechiae, which are really tiny. You'll see these little focal areas of hemorrhage around there. Also with the neck, one of the things that we're looking for are petechiae on the surface of it. We're also trying to see if the actual what's commonly referred to as the windpipe itself is crushed. It's a cartilaginous body. So we're trying to see if it's fractured in any way. And if it is fractured, there'll also be associated hemorrhage. In addition to that, you have these muscles that overlie, and it almost looks like let's see, how can I describe it? It almost looks like a basket weave, okay, where they're kind of interlocking and laced over they're called strap muscles. And we can actually dissect out each one of these strap muscles and kind of peel them back so that you can lay them out individually and look not just on the anterior, which is the front, but also the underlying surface to look for any kind of hemorrhage there. It shocks me, Dave, that this was missed, because this diagnosis that we're talking about, brother, this is very, very specific, because just let me read this out to you. The second autopsy found trauma to her neck. Okay. Now that's not very specific, but what they say is that she died of asphyxia, and there was also associated blunt force trauma of the neck. Now, what does that say to me? That says to me that if they're talking about asphyxia, there might very well have been evidence of petechial hemorrhaging, these little pinpoint hemorrhages. Now, how do you miss that? How do you miss that in the first run through with this? Were there petechiae in the eyes? Because many times if the airway is compromised, you'll have people that are struggling, and the little vessels will burst in the eye, because not only are are you struggling to breathe, the blood flow is inhibited. So the internal pressure creates these little busted vessels on the surface of the eye and the inner portion of the lids. You can see petechiae on the surface of the lungs. Okay, many times. And then, of course, the overlying strap muscles, you can see hemorrhage that is associated with petechiae, but you can also see them, focal areas of hemorrhage that are associated with blunt force trauma. So what does that mean? Does that mean that she was strangled? Like a throttling where you grab her, like you think of an old-timey black and white movie where somebody comes out and they take their hands, they wrap them around the throat. Was this, they're saying blunt force trauma because that's kind of blunt, or was she punched in the throat? Which again would leave evidence of trauma. I don't know, brother. I mean, I'm just kind of scratching my head. The more I kind of peel this onion right here, the more questions it seems.
All right, now here's the interesting part beyond all that, okay? That's what I was thinking, what kind of investigation was done? And you started off at the very beginning by talking about the man in his position and how he set things up. And I believe they did go down that path. Hey, you know what? This is what he said. She'd been having headaches. She had medical issues going on, blah, 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 buy into what he's saying and just move along. But it was very quickly after she's in the ground that the world starts shaking. No, they had a lot of issues going on. So detectives start investigating, and that's what leads to, we're going to do a second autopsy. Because see, they found out that divorce was in the air, and that Kevin West found out that if he were to get divorced, it would cost him $4,500 a month in alimony because of the way the relationship had been. And he didn't have money, couldn't make those kind of payments. So now you've got a financial motive. They also found out that based on his story of what he said, he called 911 at 4:27 a.m. Woke up. She was I'm trying to help her. I called right away. That would not be a lot of activity before that time, right? Wake up, wife's in trouble, boom, called for help. But his Apple Watch, you know how it tracks your steps? It also tracks the speed of your steps. It tracks a lot of things. And when they actually started looking at forensically looking at the available digital data, this guy was running around like a chicken with his head cut off from the time leading up to 4 a.m. He's running around thousands of steps up till 4 a.m. That's when it stopped. He stopped the running around at 4 a.m. and then call it 4:27. So all of these things come into play. They realized as it went to trial, he was charged 2 days after the autopsy, Joe. 2 days after the autopsy, they charged him with murder. Okay. And here we are. It's been adjudicated 2 years ago. That's when this happened, January 8th of 2024. Got her body back out of the ground March 20th. 2 days after that, he's arrested, charged. He stayed with the same story. Hey, she had some medical issues, having headaches, having seizures, just died. I tried to save her life. He admitted on the stand that, yes, he did have an affair. The prosecutor said it wasn't just an affair, it was an obsession, and pointed out that when they met 20 years earlier, he hadn't been married very long, and they had an affair. And while Cynthia had gone away for a while, he didn't forget about her. He tried tracking her down on social media for years. He was looking for her. And when she finally came back into his life in 2023, it was like, whew, manna from heaven. And that was it. That was where the relationship. He even went so far as to tell Cynthia Ward's mother, her mother, Joe, about getting a divorce because he was so in love with her daughter. He was just so in love with her that I think he said it went beyond soulmate. It was one of those situations where he's just talking about how much he loved her. Anyway, as all of this fell apart, the prosecutor presents the case and says to call it an affair is a little bit of an understatement. It was an obsession. He almost got away with it, Justice Scott Morgan.
Yeah, he did. He did, Dave. But thank God he didn't, because at the end of the day, you've got a public servant who has had a rather robust and long career that wound up doing just the opposite of what his job would normally dictate. That is to protect those that are in dire straits, those that are in danger. Instead, he subjected the person that he shares a home with, shares a marriage vow with, to the ultimate betrayal. That is that Marcy West is no longer with us. She's now dead at the hands of her own husband. I can tell you this. Kevin West has got about a month from right now to kind of cool his heels, because on February the 27th of 2026 in Clark County, Washington State, he's going to be sentenced, and he will pay the price for what he did to his wife. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.